Hello everybody, it is us again, and today we are going to be doing yet another one of the absolutely chaotic, unscripted, total bullshit pseudo reviews of a TTRPG game. For today's game we have Shadowrun. No, seriously, we have like a most of the bottom corner
right
behind
there,
my chair is Shadowrun. We are not gonna bring everything back here. I've been playing Shadowrun is the first TTRPG game I ever played. I bought it randomly in my local wargaming store. As always, we have a stepping dog in the back. So generally I bought it for myself randomly because I was playing Magic the Gathering and Warhammer in that store. If I recall correctly, I had this awesome little squad of orc jungle assassins because I can't paint for shit, so I just dunk them in green paint and call it a day. On a whim, I bought myself, as one of my first paychecks from my job, bought myself the first edition Shadowrun that was just randomly on the shelf because I liked the illustration. It was the same as the second edition, so like, how could you look at this and not buy this game? In short, I know a lot about this system. I kind of like it, so I GM'd it and played it for the last 30 years.
But what is actually Shadowrun? Because so far we had a lot of story time, but no actual facts.
Okay, basically Shadowrun is the game that's famous and infamous for exact same reason. It's famous because of its eclectic world and world building and storytelling and general meta stuff going on around behind in the background, and also infamous for exactly the same reasons, and also the mechanics are interesting. So generally, Shadowrun is, as the headline used to say back in the good old days, is where magic meets man and the machine, and probably some small fairy creatures, but they weren't mentioned. Anyway, so as it says, it's a future cyberpunk world that is generally based on the. Well, you know what cyberpunk is. If you don't know what cyberpunk is, look up what cyberpunk is. Come back to me. Anyway. It's cyberpunk, but it's mixed up with Tolkien-esque magic, mixed with random local folklore, magics and mythologies, with a little bit of a twist of pop science, ancient aliens style Mayan calendars, greedy dragons ruling corporations, shooting said dragons with bazookas, and generally doing hastes and being a criminal for hire, revolutionist, anarchist, do-gooder. In such a dystopian world and all of that, with the twinkle of metaplanar, the eldritch horrors, and this is a really run-on sentence, but it's the shortest way to describe Shadowrun in any amount of detail. Oh, and also conspiracy theories. Oh, and also social upheavals. Of various kinds, I'm not gonna get into all of that because you're gonna be there for the next 20 years. So, generally, to put this shortly, on the surface, Shadowrun is cyberpunk mixed with D&D-ish magic, and beneath that there is a complex and rich world building. There are mysteries to uncover, secret societies, schemes of greedy super intelligent dragons, extraplanar eldritch horror spirits, and all of that is in the middle of all of that are you, the players, just small guys mixing magic and technology and augmentation. I think this basically sets the Shadowrun world.
As far as RPGs go, Shadowrun is definitely on the crunchier side.
Oh yeah.
You're only using D6s, so it's easy to collect the dice for it, but you are going to need a lot of them unless you play online, which is advisable.
Well, generally Shadowrun in the oldest editions strived to go for this tactical semi-wargaming mechanics that worked really well for the times they were written in. Most games were rather crunchy back in the day.
The game came out in '89, so it's about as old as I am, so you know.
Yeah. Generally, it was striving for interesting tactical mechanics with a magical twist of streaks of luck or karma, as the system likes to call it. And it worked really well for what it was. First and second edition had their nuances and interesting factors, like you can roll 30 successes on one dice if you are really lucky. It happened to me like 3 times. The systems had its had its tweaks, had its little exploits that you could do. The karma system that allowed you to use additional dice and reroll dice was generally a little undercooked, but the system worked pretty well. Then the situation discussed in our Airdown video happened, and Shadowrun's rights ended up kind of in the air with WizKids releasing the 3rd edition. And then they tried to revamp those mechanics with might say pretty good levels of successes. They ironed out some bugs, they created some more, they tried to keep the spirit of the 1st and 2nd edition and keep the tacticalness without really removing any detail from it, which caused the 3rd edition to play much slower than the already rather chunky 2nd edition. And then the 4th edition was released by FunPro. And everything was fine and everybody got along. The mechanics were perfect and flawless, and the players were very happy with it forever. Nah, it was a shit show.
And then everybody clapped.
It was a shit show. Then a mixed blessing happened to the system, and it was bought by Catalyst Game Labs. Them be your name forever. I'm just kidding. And
they are the current owners of Shadowrun.
Yes, but they released this is the edition that I actually like, I think, the most, which is the 4th edition 20th anniversary, or 4A as opposed to 4E, which reworked the what FunPro tried to do with the game, and revamped it and modernized it a lot. And quite frankly, this is the best the system has ever gotten, in my personal opinion. It still had some rather interesting flaws, mostly limited to self-contradictory rules in a couple of places between a couple of books, and the fact that everybody was confused when buying source books because they bought 4th edition and then it was not compatible with 4th edition, and who is in charge of this mess. As it turned out, nobody, and 5th edition was released.
I would have shown you the...
So this is the 4A.
Yes.
As opposed to 4E. This is A.
It's released by Catalyst Game Labs, and if you're just getting into Shadowrun, Then
get this one instead.
If you're just getting into Shadowrun and you like your games crunchy, this is probably your best starting point because it is rather self-contained.
I would actually disagree if we're going to make a little cut. There is one most important book we forgot, which is the biggest reason why I like the 4A the most. I mean this one. This is Shadowrun 2050. If you want to get into this game, into the retro future mixed with magic, get into this. This book is mostly first of all, much smaller.
But it is also 4th edition.
It is 4th edition.
Yes.
It is 4th edition. It is compatible with 4A.
That's the set.
Completely, because it's the same edition. What it is the setting. So basically this is fully compatible with the 4A, but it takes you back into the setting and technology and magic of the 1st edition of the game, while keeping with the modernized rules of the 4th edition, as reworked by Catalyst Game Labs before the 5th edition. There is also a 5th edition version of this book if you speak German. If you don't speak German, learn German or play 4th edition. Both tasks are at about the same level of difficulty, so just pick one and go with it.
Although that's true, if you do speak German, your experience in Shadowrun is going to be much better than in English.
They are the best localized publisher that game could have ever gotten.
Which is also why Shadowrun is rather popular in Germany. And
in Poland
yes.
as well. And the 5th edition came, which is basically 4th edition. This is the last current edition. There is only one more to go. Two more to go, I swear. The 5th edition is the attempt by Catalyst Game Labs to push the timeline forward and fix the bugs of the 4th edition and make the game faster to play without losing much of the complexity. However, unbeknownst to anybody, none of it makes any goddamn sense personally. You can play this game, it's gonna be good. You can start the game from 5th edition and you're gonna have a good time. It's all good. Just don't start getting into detailed rules of literally anything, because you are going to have a headache. To make long story short, 5th edition picks up where 4th edition left off, fixes some bugs, attempts to be faster, attempts to be more modern, but due to poor editing choices and
overblown scale of the project.
Yes, overblown scale of the project and various people releasing various supplements, not really talking to each other or knowing each other or knowing about each other's existence, living on the same planet in the same century, many other reasons, and also, jokes aside, mostly because various supplements were given out to freelance writers that weren't really able to cooperate and coordinate with each other. As a result of that, within 6 years, 5th edition became an absolute mess. There are contradictory rules from one source book, contradicting rules from another source books. There are, even in the same core rulebook, there are rules that contradict each other on the same freaking page. So those are minor details, but they accumulate, so it gets complicated really fast.
So a good tip, if you want to play 5th edition Shadowrun, check out a YouTube channel called Complex Action.
Yes.
Which is run by Bobby, who has a bunch of really good quick videos.
There is a massive catalog of explanations for rules for the game.
So yeah, check out Complex Action if you want to play 5th edition, because it is going to boil down this into short, couple minutes long videos explaining each mechanic, and it's going to make your life so much easier.
Yeah, and also use Charmer to create your characters, both for 4th and 5th edition. And now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, 6th edition. We do not have it, we are not going to show it any. We're gonna show you Anarchy instead. Let's not talk about 6th edition. It doesn't exist.
If you can't figure it out, Jakub is not a fan.
Yeah,
I haven't played it, so.
I got it when it was first released, and it was an absolute mess, and it showed not only the lack of any care about the release for the Gen Con, and it also showed a lack of care about the world and everything else, and literally contained phrases like Argle Bubble, Fufarafa, nobody cares. So I'm not gonna care either, and even though the 6th edition was apparently improved and is now playable, I do not care.
Let's instead talk about Anarchy, which is the easiest way to play in the world of Shadowrun without going through all of those books. But this is all that you need to play Anarchy.
Yeah, it's a narrative version of the rules. It is, if you don't like crunchy games and want to play Shadowrun, this is what I recommend you to play. Because frankly, it's pretty good. It has some minor nuances and problems with the mechanics, but overall it works really well, and whatever problems you encounter during play, you can just fix it.
Yeah, and if you played games like Fate, or other narrative games, you are already used to the idea of creating your characters by just picking several core concepts and then using that as a base for your narrative. I haven't played Anarchy, I made a couple of characters in it, but we always delve more into the crunchy, heavily homebrewed version of the 4th and 5th edition together, which is Jakub's special.
It's my special
version.
brew.
It's his special brew for Shadowrun.
Anarchy is good, it has minor problems. It had a problem with adept characters not being given any powers at the start of the game and stuff like that. But those are things that you can just, glance at it and say like, oh yeah, that's just editing problem. I'm just gonna give that adept character his freaking powers that he needs to play the game and move on with your life. So it doesn't have any show-stopping problems like the 6th edition, in which the entire book is show-stopping problems. And it doesn't have problems of rules being inconsistent like the 5th edition, and it doesn't have problems of game turning into spaghetti like the 4th edition, and it doesn't have problem of costing €200 on Amazon like the 1st edition. This is the rules. We're not gonna talk about the rules anymore because this video is already 3 days long. The next thing is when you buy physical copies of those books, you have to count on your gentle care, because quite frankly the 1st and 2nd edition books are really old and they've been glued together with snot, and the 4th and 5th and 6th editions of the game were published by Catalyst Game Labs. So for example, I opened my Anarchopedia or Streetpedia or whatever it's called book once, and it was half the pages. You just have to be careful with that. Those books are... Some people tell me, I've heard also on Reddit and other forums that some people just don't understand why people think Shadowrun books fall apart, because theirs are been there heavily used for 10 years and they are perfectly fitting together. Other people just look at their books and they turn into dust like a vampire in the sunlight. I'm like somewhere in the middle. Most of my books are fine. You gotta be careful with that. That's just something to keep in mind. Other than that, the books are pretty, they're rather okayishly laid out and don't really have many technical issues when it comes to release themselves, other than the glue. The unique thing about Shadowrun's world, other than the magic meets man meets machine, is of course the fact that it has a long-running meta plot with complex nuances and conspiracies and things that aren't true and things that are true, and like all the stuff to discover. And every edition of the game moved the timeline forward from 3 to 10 years in some situations. So you basically can start the game in the timeline of the 1st edition and just move on forward to have a 30-year in-game, 30-year long campaign, with a progressively moving forward timeline that your players can influence or not, and just see the world evolve around them. And there are really amazing campaign sets, especially in the older editions, like the Denver boxed set. That's just beautiful.
Probably the best box set.
Yeah, we've never been to Denver, but we know that city like the back of our hand, probably.
We played in it a lot.
Yes.
The default setting for most games is Seattle, but it's rainy and gloomy and I don't want to be there, so we started playing in Denver and it's much nicer. Mostly because it's a very politically cut city with a bunch of national borders going through the city, and it allows for a lot of smuggling action. If I seem distracted, that's because I have a dog here.
In addition to the meta plot, the world is described very nicely, partially by in-world, partially by in-world characters commenting, partially by out-of-world explanations. So it's a nice sort of Watsonian / Doylean mix that you can play with. And most of the world is described pretty well, albeit sometimes it gets iffy when it comes to the local nuances that a writer in USA probably simply didn't know about, but then they look it up on the internet and write up stories involving this or that historical events that happens to still be a sore wound in that people's history.
Yes.
But yes, there have been heated debates on the internet about some of the source books and the treatment of local folklores and histories and fresh wounds in recent history of particular nations in various supplements, or the treatment, or the respectful or not respectful treatment of certain indigenous cultures in the world. There has been many debates. If you want to look into it, go and do it. But there has been a lot of that. But altogether, as for a casual game that you are playing without getting into the real world implications of anything that's been written about, most of the local source books check out more or less, and they have been at least sometimes done with collaboration of players and developers from the countries in question. As long as you are not from some East Asian or African country, Australia or South America or Europe or Mexico, then you're going to have fun. Did I mention Greenland?
You haven't yet, but...
Yes. Yeah, I'm exaggerating, but generally you can have pretty much find your local place in the world in some source book described at least somewhat in this Shadowrun edition or the other, and then you can, fill up the gaps and resolve problems of various natures by yourself before you start the campaign, but you have that background.
The good part about Shadowrun is the availability of material, because across 6 editions there have been multiple source books and adventures and campaigns, and a lot of it is still good, still worth playing. You will find yourself probably reworking a bit of it, because part of it has been written by people and in times where the default group was just 4 guys wanting to shoot everything that moves. So yeah, it will take a bit of work to rework it into more modern approach to RPGs. There's also a lot of books and novels and short stories. Those protagonists are very unlikable, from my perspective. Well, it does carry the 30 years of tradition behind it, and not all of that aged well.
So there is a lot of Shadowrun novels, but read them at your own peril. Some of them are good, some of them are not. You can generally find the list on Wikipedia and then check Reddit or some other source to see which ones are worth reading. I haven't read most of them, so I can't really tell.
Well, Worlds Without End are pretty good.
Yes, of course.
But we like Caroline Spector in this house. Well, I think that's all we wanted to tell you about Shadowrun. It's definitely a system that's worth checking out, especially now because Catalyst, after many years, has just opened the community program. So now you can legally create homebrew content and be a game designer for Shadowrun within their community license program for extra materials, which is something that has been missing from Shadowrun for very many years. Even I, who made a bunch of spells for my character when we were playing Shadowrun, I had to post them on my blog with a lot of disclaimers. Well, it used to be a problem that Catalyst and Pops, who actually owns the right to Shadowrun, had a rather created a rather hostile environment when it comes to creating your own content for Shadowrun. But this is all we can tell you today, because our dog demands a walk.
Yes, and it's either that or she wants to contribute her knowledge of Shadowrun to this video.
And we hope you have a great afternoon or morning or whenever this actually goes out and you watch it. Like, subscribe, bark, join our Patreon. Here is the link to our Patreon. Here's a list of our beautiful patrons that are supporting us there. And you can join them whenever you want.
You go and investigate Shadowrun Anarchy or 4th edition by my recommendation, or any other edition at your own risk.
And if you wanna play at some EU-friendly time zones, let us know.
You know what else Shadowrun is good for? Bench pressing.
Bye.
Bye. Is something happening in the house? Hello, I am Lindsay Lohan. Hello everybody, we are looking in the camera as instructed by the cat.
Oh, back in the day. Where are my dentures, baby?
Hey.
Crab people, crab people. Ah, no, don't drag me anywhere. I love you, CGO.